Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Today we crown royalty. This is one of the most exciting events in your museum life that you will ever have. And you can think of it as Museums Got Talent. You can think of it as sort of the ultimate recognition. You can think of it as the Emmys of the museum world or the Oscars of the museum world. There's nothing, this is the highest accolade any museum can receive in the world at any time. So,
definitely.
With that, let me introduce
No pressure.
let me introduce the esteemed panel of judges. First, Luis Marcelo Mendes from the Museum of Contemporary Art, Panama. And on my right, Silvia Singer from the Museum of, the Interactive Museum of the Economy. Yes, in Mexico. And I'm Jim Volkert, and I was in the neighborhood, so I thought I would stop by. The way that this program will work is that there are 5 projects to be presented. Each presenter will come up and have 5 minutes or so to present their project. There will be 5 minutes of conversation between this group as jurors and the presenters to clarify, to ask additional questions, to probe, to raise their anxiety level. We'll do all kinds of things along those lines. We'll do that 5 times, and at which point the jury will retire to come to its decision, and the award ceremony will begin. And the award, as you know, this is a coronation, so it will in fact be a coronation. At which point all of you will, once the winner is announced, all of you will erupt into applause, standing and cheering.
And knee.
and kneel. Okay. That's the format, that's what we'll do. We have 5 really interesting projects, all different from across Latin America, and invite you to explore with them at the earliest point in the project, you know, how you would approach this. So let me start with number 1, Lucía Bianco from the Museum del Puerto Ingeniero White in Argentina, whose project is 600 kilos of onions enough?
A round of applause. Aplaudamos, por favor.
Take care. Hi.
Good luck.
Suerte.
Muchas gracias. No, por ahora no.
De nuevo, los hombres alcanzan con 600 kilos de cebolla.
Vamos a pasar. Para ustedes.
Gracias.
Que empiece.
This is a new different thing. She's speaking about preparing a cazuela and using lots and lots of onions. Laurel and oil is also used for this. So you place all this in the pot. You do not have to cook this these onions for very much. Then you include the sauce. After you cook the sauce quite well, you have to cut lots of parsley and oregano, and you bring all this together. He's asking Maria, why do you need to be a good cook? Well, you need a lot of love. So we began this project listening to Maria Marzoca. She's a neighbor of Engineer White, and we were interviewing her with regards to her cooking practices. If there is something that all of us do is eat, right? And therefore someone always has to cook. Paradoxically, this everyday practice is not part of a narrative of our history. And in a part of our lives, we always say there's always a cook that we need, even in narrative. Without food, there is no narrative. So we're asking ourselves this question: how can we create a local history made of food? including multiple bodies, multiple territories, multiple experience, multiple voices. But again, the question is, how do we make this local history without community participation, without community history? But for this, we have to ask ourselves, what is a community? And what communities have, and how do museums contribute to their own history? These are questions that lead us to these big cookout parties. Yes, these big cookout parties, these huge parties that in which hundreds of people bring food, and excess is typical in this type of feast or cookout. And this food feast in Buenos Aires, again, bring all the social history with them. Perhaps in the places where you come from, you have been to a similar experience. Again, this is sort of like a popular party that involves lots of food. So the idea here is that we want to do a local symposium of food parties or food feast. The same way that you bring scientists to speak about their knowledge, we want to bring experts in these events. We want to bring them together, just like as we are meeting today here in Medellin and narrating our experiences. Yes, we want these food feast experts to come together and find similarities and differences, and why not develop future work networks the way we're trying to do it here. We are in an era of large-scale food feast, but again, we do not simply want to praise them. The idea is to try to connect them with our museums, to try to determine differences in identities, changes in identities, and to also articulate the small scale, the micro scale of everyday life with larger scales. To activate it with our local economy, and why not the global economy, connected with human changes. We want to do that as well. And for this, well, what are we going to do? We're going to prepare a gathering at the museum, Museo del Puerto. We have a hall that we call the kitchen, and we're going to have a gathering there, a meeting there, where these people from the area are going to come, and they're going to spend an afternoon together. We're going to welcome them with a huge table with freshly baked cookies, baked by ladies who participate in our community, because in a food festival we need to have unlimited amounts of food. So this welcome is going to take place as soon as they come in, and all regional groups are going to have time to narrate their stories. They're going to have time to narrate how collective work came to be. It is quite important for them to share and to listen to each other. Again, I am comparing this with this a collective experience of sharing knowledge. This is, again, they're sharing knowledge. In addition, the museum is going to have an active participation in this gathering, and we're also going to record it. And this is going to result in a publication, a recipe book of food festivals. Again, a recipe book that includes all the recipes and all the multiple articulations between the micro and the micro and macro that I was speaking about. At the end of this event, we're going to give each one of the participants one of these gigantic forks, and this gigantic fork or trophy dimensions part of the work of these people. Today you're taking something else with you, is these little napkins that we gave some of you. And again, the idea is for you to try to make some of those recipes at home, but that is not exactly the case. I would correct something on those recipes after yesterday's sancocho soup, but I give you this so you can question yourselves about those publications and what is missing in those recipes. What is missing in those recipes is everything that we're going to speak about in the symposium. It's not only 600 kilos of onions, it's all the onions that were chopped by our grandmothers, neighbors, friends, tons and tons of onions to create this regional history made of food, not exclusive of bodies, a history that asks questions for a global history of food. Thank you.
Thank you. Es- eh,
onions. Make a lot of people cry.
Okay.
So,
I tried.
you're inviting experts. Who are the experts?
¿Cómo? No, I need a translation.
Again, the answer is experts are everyday life experts from little towns, urban areas, small urban areas. Many of those experts simply prepare foods, perhaps related to German migration to Buenos Aires, or Italian migrants who came to Buenos Aires, or perhaps recipes that deal with the way meat was exported in a small town in the south of Buenos Aires, that again makes perhaps meat a big deal for this place, and therefore they have huge barbecues. I am going to say who we're going to invite. Well, we have these people who cook this huge casserole with prawns. We're inviting another group that cooks a gigantic barbecue, another group that cooks sort of like a sweet dessert in Colonia Santa Maria that is also huge in that area. We're also inviting the cooks of hundreds and hundreds of churros, which is a sweet fried dough, the cooks of hundreds of crepes in another region, and finally a group of inhabitants of a place called Inuit that cook an omelette that has 4.5 meters in size. So it's 6 different groups from 6 different localities
Gracias por la
where they have these huge food festivals. Thank you for the question, and thank you for translating. Second question, how does the community participate? They only come to eat? Well, the community, they really do not come to eat in this food festival. What we're bringing is communities to narrate their experiences, to tell us how they cook their foods. Oh, so the food is not part of the symposium? Yes, the food is in the symposium because those who welcome them from the Museo del Puerto invite a community to prepare a food, to prepare a meal for that day. This is a bunch of little those that are going to be there waiting for people when they arrive.
I love this project. It kind of addresses the basic needs that we have as humans, right? I mean, food, art, and Wi-Fi. So if you have that, you're doing great.
Thanks.
Muy-
And tell me, what are you waiting as a result? What is the result that you expect? What are you working for? Well, this is also an articulation of narratives, of stories. We want to include this perspective of daily work. This is what makes up history. This is also social tissue regarding history. But there's also the question as to how we can conceive the sense of community expanded and articulated, and in addition, putting those values, making them visible and making them valuable, more valuable. Do you think that this experience of cooking during the symposium can be an interesting experience for participants? Well, I think it's actually the opposite in this case. These are communities, these are groups that are known and valued in the media for being very good cooks, for their cooking practices. In this case, we want to learn, we want to hear their knowledge, we want them to reflect about their experience, we want them to reflect about similar experiences. And this is where we think that the museum is making a contribution. It's not simply replicating what they do. Again, they are recognized as great cooks and producers of these huge food festivals. So again, the idea is for the museum to listen to
one
them.
more question. I own a restaurant in your town. How do I feel about this?
La pregunta tengo de nuevo un restaurante cerca en el barrio del museo. ¿Cómo se sentiría el dueño del restaurante? The question is, again, I own a restaurant in your town. How do I feel about it? Well, it's not really an event for going to eat. It's an event for going to listen to those who, again, have this knowledge about cooking. Again, the idea is placing cooks, and again, these are great cooks. They're not chefs. We're not speaking about chefs or culinary skill events. We're speaking about small communities that, again, sometimes this is relatives, friends, neighborhoods, different societies, and they prepare these community food festivals. This is what we're speaking about. Thank you.
Suerte.
Okay. Number two. Number two, Andrés Alberto Duque from the Museo de Arte Pereira in Colombia, and the project is Neighbor in the Window.
Antonio Mónaco cree que
Hello.
también realizó no puede ser.
Good morning to you all. I hope that we dialed in properly here. We're just dialing in to the right station there. I'm Andrés Duque Garcia. I am educator. I'm a museum producer and an artist in Pereira. Most of you will know where Pereira is. It's 5 hour away ride towards the south of Colombia. We have a population of 475,000 inhabitants. And the art museum, the Pereira Art Museum, it's not working, sorry. Yeah, anyway, the art museum, the Pereira Art Museum, unfortunately it's outside, it's in the periphery of the city. And we do not have, in front of the museum, we don't really have, houses that can see us very close. But we are surrounded by a huge neighborhood. Just opposite the museum, we have a highway, the second most important highway in the city. So we have realized that around the museum, we have a huge neighborhood. And this neighborhood is called La Lorena and Providencia. Since we're an art museum, we don't really have a lot of contact with the surrounding community. But from the back window of the museum, we can actually count more than 200 windows. And those people from their home can only count 6 windows. We have a little yard towards the back of the museum, and a huge wall, 15-meter wall there, 50 meter high, 23 meter wide wall. So on this huge wall, we want to project audiovisual pieces, but not as video mapping. But what we want to do is just through a video beam and a wave antenna, and a radio antenna, just as the one we're using for those of you who are using the translation devices. What we want to do is take that signal to the different homes of people. So I just want you to take into account that Pereira is in the middle of the 3 biggest cities of Colombia, Medellin, Bogotá, and Cali. So we're at the center of that triangle. So you have to get there in order to travel from that one city to the other. And we never had this auto cinema. Outside cinema, and the idea is to basically use that same idea, which is basically free, outside, and for you, many of you, it might be a radical idea of getting to the homes of people, because sometimes we want people to visit us, of course. But I think it's extremely important to basically break those very close, very tight traditions of the museums, especially art museums. And my idea is to basically project ourselves as a community museum. This is the case of the San Jacinto Community Museum in Montes de Maria. I visited them, and I know the projects quite well. So, what I propose is that we should think of museums as, and we should project the museums to the communities, around the communities, and in that way we'll be able to measure the power of museums in terms of what impact we can have in those communities. Not only thinking about the educational communities, which of course have always been the common visitors, but what we are now thinking is going to the homes of people, which are the core of society, and finding the appropriate times and the contents. What we're going to do is we're going to go and knock on the doors, the ones that, where we can see, the windows we can see from our window, and we'll introduce ourselves as neighbors. We'll do some ethnographical work or survey to see what their tastes are and what their needs are, and having co-curators, and something I've been working on, which is participatory museographies, so that those visitors actually use the space, an exhibition space of their own things, of the things they like, of their own personal objects, and of their own lives and professions. So museums sometimes think that we're on a long queue, at the end of a long queue. But looking at the situation in which the country faces now, we're at the head, actually, we're at the front of that queue, and we should actually be facing this and understanding, trying to remind society that they should reconcile with their memories. And we also need to take into account that we need to look at the community in the eyes, the community will represent, and remind them what are actually peace spaces. And with their help, of course, we'll take benefits to their own homes, or to each member of their own families. So when they go out to fulfill their roles in society, and they do it with a vision that can be more constructive and transforming. Thank you very much.
Una duda. La idea.
The idea that I understood is that basically people can actually see the content from their own windows, right? From their home. Yes, exactly. Okay. However, there's still a common space that can be offered to the people so they can get out of their home and look at that content together with the community, or not? The idea is that ourselves, from the museum, go to their homes. The idea is that we knock on their doors and start creating a dialogue. Because we are projecting our museum to the city, but not very often we actually think about the neighborhood, the surrounding neighborhood. So the idea is to have a permanent, constant interaction mechanism with the community so they can feel represented.
Creo que siguiendo la línea de pensamiento.
So on that same line of thought, I think this is a wonderful idea, but I'm asking myself, I just ask myself, where do people come out of their own homes? Where do they go beyond the windows and can actually coexist with the community? Have you thought about this? Yes, of course. The idea is that those spaces are not only used as exhibition spaces for their objects, but that through those exhibitions we program that, of course, the neighbors come to the museum, actually visitors. The idea is to get close to them as a device. We should use this as a tool in order to communicate with them. Can you tell a little bit more about, for instance, you've done like 4 or 5 projections. People look at them from their homes, but now people are so happy that they actually want to go and share a common space with people. So how would you do that? We do that with the curators, opening the space of the museum in the way we normally use it, and we have thought about getting close to the community through technological tools, technological systems such as radio, and in that way we can allow them to communicate with other neighbors. Since this is an unreleased or non-published project, one of the strategies is basically we're open to options or ideas, but we want to ask them, what's your concept of art? What do you think about art? And in that way, we should allow them to express themselves in that way. or maybe recognizing or asking them what's a trade or what's the job and what are your tastes. We can ask them that, and in that way we can actually identify the community. Yes, but but the taste of people will be different from the taste of curators, of course, at the museum. Yeah, sure, that's very interesting because actually I constantly reflect on that, and actually we want to break that tradition in a way, so that the community actually becomes co-curators.
Okay. Windows can either be transparent or reflective.
Yeah.
You can either see in or you can't see in. And what I'd be interested in is more comment about looking at it from both sides of the window rather than simply a portal out to the museum. What's the portal back? I'm not quite understanding that. If you ask me as one of the neighbors what I would like to see, I'd like to see cat videos. Will you show me cat videos?
Or Kung Fu videos.
Yes, probably. That would be a wonderful way of getting closer to the neighbors. Allow them showing their interest to others too. But also we try and use some pedagogical tools in order to allow them to come to the collections that we have in the museum as well. Have you thought that maybe somebody could be offended, feel bad with the huge projections that you're gonna be projecting just opposite the windows? Yes, of course. I mean, it's we're running a risk because sometimes people from their home just want to look out of the window and look at the wonderful blue sky. Yes. However, I think it's very important to carry out this ethnographical survey before we actually go and break the daily routines. But it is important that we go and get closer to them. We go and say hello to them because many times we just in our museums we just put on our exhibitions and we expect people to come and look at them. But not very often do we go to the homes of people and ask them, come and look at us. Show me what you have in order for us to see you as well. Gracias. Thank you very much.
Number 3, Barbara Elmúdesi. I'm sorry. If I will mangle everyone's names, and I really apologize for that. From the Museum Austral in Chile, and this is the history. From the Museum Austral in Chile.
You!
And this is the history of an object.
Hi. Great pleasure.
Hola, Bárbara. Mucho gusto.
Hi, I am Bárbara. I come from Chile, and I came here to share a project with you, which is the history of an object. It is an intervention, a selection of basically objects of the museum, and it could be implemented in any of the museums. But just to tell you and just to show you what the idea of the project is, I'm going to show you an object which is part of the Historical and Anthropological Museum of the University of Chile at the south of Chile, in Valdivia. This is, I work with the directors of this museum. But before we start, I would like you to ask yourselves a question about this object. Think, what did you feel when you actually look at this object? What do you imagine? What do you remember, maybe? What do you think? What do you wish for? What do you want? Because even though we have an interaction with this object and it can tell us a lot from who we are, many times the museum actually gives us a description card that's very limited and it's very authoritarian. And even when we know that these interpretations or descriptions are conclusive. I became very nervous. Sorry, I forgot to show you more perspectives or show pictures of the same object so you could have looked at it and felt something from it and seen what things you want when you look at this object. So I just wanted to show you that, for example, the description card for this object that the museum created. When I go to a museum, whenever I've had to write these description cards, they tell you what is relevant about that object and what. These description cards are very well written, but they tell us what we need to know about that object as visitors. Look at the description card that this museum created a bit closer. It says that the object is embroidery done by the wife of Dolores, wife of Conrad, using the hair of the children. The interpretation that you had when you looked at it, is it close to what the museum's interpretation is? The thing is that the museum's actually assigning different meanings on these objects that have to do with the collections, of course, and the interpretations, of course, are very limited many times. And in that way, we have visitors that come to the museum trying to understand, instead of just getting closer to the objects and to the collections with their own words and with their own feelings. So they just start trying to understand the interpretations. And that's why we need to open the interpretation of those objects, and we want to challenge the overvaluing of that objectivity. That's why I propose this history of an object, which is an intervention that wants to replace those description cards of 20 objects from the museum with a fiction his story, 150 words that will be based on the things that the interpretations that the visitors will have from those objects or of those objects. This is how I imagine it. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to cover the description cards for a couple of weeks at the museums, and we'll ask the participants or the visitors to contribute and give us their own interpretations through statements that will be written on cards, and they'll be able to fill them in. And the statements will be things like this, and they'll be placed next to the object that we are going to be reinterpreting in that way. And in that way, visitors will be able to look at the object, experience it, and share with us their own interpretations. When those cards are completed or filled in, the idea would be to give them to a local writer, and we'll commission a fiction story, a short story, 150 words only. Of course, a different one for each object. And the challenge that the writer has is that it has to be based on the interpretations that are collected on these cards left by visitors. It won't be longer than 150 words. Of course, thinking about the average number of words that we have on a description card, and it will be written by hand. It's going to be handwritten, trying to show the fact that interpretations in these collections have an author. They are not actually neutral. So the statements that I would like the visitors to share with us are things like this. This object makes me feel, this object makes me want, wish for, this object makes me remember, or this object makes me think about. In this way, the local writer will be able to write their own fiction, piece of fiction, and which will be replacing the original description card by the museum. This will be a temporary intervention, being based on the story or the story behind this object. Another thing, this project is seeking to create these physical spaces, collaboration, symbolic spaces, about the meaning of things, and giving value to the interpretation of the visitors, but also valuing the artistic contribution that the local writer can have and share with the with everyone based on the interpretations of those visitors. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bárbara, una pregunta.
And Bárbara, just a question. How do you think you are going to measure the impact of this experiment? Well, we could think about it very quantitatively, thinking about how many people participated, how many answers we had. But I think it would be also very interesting to, from the other hand, look at what the reception of visitors who were not part of this project, how they receive the intervention, and which has nothing to do with what they're used to. We would like to see how they react. Maybe it will make them think or rethink about the object. We want to know if they actually ask themselves questions, like, okay, this story is very strange. It doesn't coincide with what I see. But it would also be interesting to see what happens when the story is actually description.
You're walking a very fine line here. And the reason I say that is because what you've put out, especially the object that you used as an example of a bouquet of flowers woven from the hair by a woman of her daughter's hair, is incredibly mysterious, a little creepy, but very mysterious. And so for a visitor who can't decode that, who you're asking them to respond, to react to what emotions and so forth, and there may or may not be a connection to that. There may be a sort of, the question I guess is on the one hand, the museum becomes anonymous by saying we won't tell you what this is, you just react to it. Or are there triggers that the museum offers? The part that's most interesting to me is this notion of writing a fiction based on ambiguous objects. That to me is really an interesting approach to a museum where people create their own fictions anyway as they walk through the museum. So what role does the museum play other than synthesizing visitor reactions into a story? How do you see that working?
Sí, imagino.
Yes, I think the role of the writer here, who will have to write a fiction, it's very important. His role is very important because I ask myself, what happens if very contradictory things start coming up, or maybe if people actually write very offensive things, perhaps. I think that the work of the writer, or the role of the writer, will have to do with that, synthesizing, and perhaps somebody will say, this doesn't make me feel or think about anything, or, I'm being asked questions I don't want to answer. That could be true. And the work or the role of the writer is most important there, because the writer has to, make these interpretations visible, but in a way that's also attractive. And of course, the way the project is presented, this is just one possible story. Perhaps when we have different visitors, when the writer is a different writer, story of the same object can change.
What I really like about this project is that the idea of the didactic information that a museum supplies is something that any of us in any museum can evaluate, reassess, change, modify, experiment with. It's all in your control and it costs little money. And that's what's interesting about this.
So, thank you. Okay, at the end, how is the book going to be available? No, it's not going to be a book. It's just going to be the description card. The description card is going to be the story. But it would be interesting to compile these different description cards and stories in a small book. Yeah, you're right. And what if I don't I agree with the approach of the writer. How can I write my own story? Yeah. If the participant who shared their reactions doesn't like the story, you mean? Well, I think we could keep playing with the reinterpretation in other ways. Maybe in the following version of a project like this, it won't be the story of an object, but it will be maybe create your own piece of art, or maybe a drawing, I don't know, showing your own interpretation of the object. But yeah, you're right. It's one of the things that could happen, and it will probably happen to many people, because interpretations are very personal and they're all very different. Do you think it would be interesting that some of the visitors, if they wanted, could compare the interpretation of the writer, the synthesizers, that with against the original curator's description card? Yeah, that would be very interesting. What you just told me, comparing it to their own interpretations. Yeah, thanks for that idea. this compilation in the form of a book would be a way of showing differences and these contradictions even that will happen in the execution of this project. Maybe a catalog would be a way of showing this. Yeah. Gracias. Great. Success.
Gracias.
Number 4, Michael Andreas Forero from Museum Q, Colombia.
Some people say that if you see something, you should not ask. And this is a response that a Mexican singer by the name of Juan Gabriel gave a reporter in 2002 when he was asked if he was gay. After a bit of flirting and an ambiguous response, when he was 52 years old, this Latin man embraced the opportunity of narrating his existence using his own words. In 1976, when homosexuality was still penalized in Colombia, an Antiochian writer, Leon Zuleta, published in a newspaper the story of a homosexual movement in Colombia that had 10,000 members. This was a fantasy produced by the only member who made his life public, and he was killed in 1993. Affirming your existence, daring to say I am, implies claiming that you want to see, recognize, and seen. However, for many, existence is a continuous process of hiding and revealing. Being in the closet is a place for hiding and discovering. It is a space that expands and is reduced, is never static. Without a closet, there is no coming out of the closet, and there is no invention, because the darkness of the closet provides a lack of definition that creates different types of living. And this hideout also allows you to narrate in different ways regardless of the content. Narrating your own existence for many implies knowing how to present yourself without saying I am. Colombia is trying to move away from exclusion that for many years have characterized our national history, and that as a consequence have invisibilized many deaths and many lives that have not been exhibited in the walls of our museums. This search and recognition of different stories of people that are outside this heterogeneous norm is where Q Museum, or Museo Q, and the project Moving the Q is inserted. In October 2016, thanks to a scholarship from the Museum of Arts of Bogota, we launched our first exhibition entitled What You See, You Do Not Ask, a project that we began to work in 2014 in a few weeks through video, drawings, and ephemeris material that is part of Museo Q. Women and men came to see and share discrimination moments of fear, violence, and resistance. Museo Q created a space for them to exist. This exhibition with different elements that participated became a mechanism to express feelings, thoughts, and possibilities. It was the visitors who, on top of a map of Bogota, asked about the non-normative sexuality of people that were displaced, people from Tunja and France in Medellin or Barranquilla, different cities. They drew planes and they drew stories from other latitudes to indicate that our stories are important. For those who have not had the experience, coming out of the closet is not a before and an after. It's a constant living of positive and negative expectations that are built when you're inside the closet, and the confirmation of fears that makes us stay in those closets, which is frequently safe. Coming out of the closet, all the public declarations at your work, at your school, at your office generates new memories and new experiences that are unedited. Likewise, this experience as a participative exercise develops unexplored narratives with visitors, artists, and the inhabitants of the cities where this is exhibited. Museum Q wants to roam with this itinerate. The book of Zuleta was written many years ago. We want to take advantage of our non-existent side to discover the life of many people in many different realities. Reimagining the museum forces us to redraw our limits, drawn by institutions. We want to provide vital experiences with all the polemics and with all the problems that this implies doing this in antagonic context. Reorganizing the museums implies representing your voice and celebrating divergence. We want to think that Museo Q is going to be able to work with the Museum of Antioquia, Museo de Arte de Medellín, or with Parque Explora. We would like to work with them, and perhaps in the future with the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. Moving the queue can be a couple exercise in trios or a group exercise. Reimagine the museum allows you to exchange experiences, working with allies and re-strengthening lens. Moving queue allows you to build bridges with those that feel distant from lives that they are not aware of. Like it happened in Bogota, we're going to invite local artists, we're going to create focal groups to involve communities, and during the exhibit we're going to build together a cartography that will reveal this other city, this city that is distant to many eyes, because without a doubt this style of forms reaffirms existence. Without a doubt, however, each Roman is not going to be the same, because it is not the same living and coming out of the closet in Medellin, Cartagena, Amazonas, or Bogota. Those are different experiences. In reconciliation times, the relevance of museum in terms of pedagogical terms is colossal. Any museums, regardless of their collection structure, budget, or place, can be a dialogue opening for these marginated existences and sometimes eliminated existences. Moving the queue is an act for remembering. Let's resign together to the invisibilization of our existence. Our lives and our deaths are part of these memories. It is not the way we roam or the way we live in the second can be a motive for change, fear, or rejection. Without museum without Q, but embrace without a Q museum to shake it, exist, and transform. No entiendo la parte de la colaboración. Moving Q is it's a word game with a very party known song here, which is moving your ass basically. This is basically what moving Q translates into. Move your ass.
Esto es de alto riesgo.
This is very stress. This is an extreme export.
What are you going to do?
I'm sorry, without the microphone I cannot translate. Well, what we did last year, we did an exhibition in Bogota about surviving and coming out of the closet. What we want to do is to travel with this exhibition throughout the country. We would like to begin in Medellin because we believe that we would like to simulate this experience of coming out of the closet, and we believe that each place that we visit, each place that we roam to is going to be different. Actually, I was going to ask you the same question. I do understand that you're looking for collaboration with other museums, but my question is, as you said during your presentation, the reaction of presenting this exhibit in different contexts, reactions are going to be different, of course. So how do you plan to include these local responses in those, say, new emissions of your exhibition? Well, the curatory format of Museo Q is a co-participatory format. It's a format with a structure, and what we do is invite local artists, and we also prepare prior focus groups that take place before the exhibit. For instance, today I'm coming out of the closet as a drag in front of all of you. And we're going to continue doing this. And we're going to continue doing this, and this is what we're here for, to make you move your ass in Medellin, Tunja, and the Colombian periphery is exactly what we require for our peace, for our people, for our memoirs. So you're speaking about focus groups, and this narrative is going to be a part of the exhibit? Yes, absolutely. For instance, well, let us explain briefly how it took place in Bogota. We conducted focus groups with men above 45 years old and below 45 years old. The idea was to create a very human experience for men who are currently 50 or 60 years old. Coming out of the closet is a completely different experience from men and women who are 18 years old and are coming out of the closet today. Bogota, likewise, has very specific characteristics for people who are coming out of the closet. And likewise, here in Medellin, in Antioquia, is different if you come out of the closet in Envigado, in Urabá, whether lesbian, gay, transsexual. All these people have different experiences, and those experiences are going to nourish our exhibit. Although we believe that each store, each place that we visit is going to have a base, but it is not the same thing. It is not the same thing to do it in Medellin next year, or to do it in Amazonas, or to do it in San Andres. This is always going to change. Yes, but there is something interesting. Is there a perspective about sharing this experience with other communities in Latin America? Have you expected that? Well, in Latin America, we would like to go to other places in Latin America, but first we want to go to different places in our national territory. I think it is worth saying that in our dynamics, exercises, and exhibits, these are going to be developed as days go by. They develop, first we do cartographies, we do workshops, and in the workshops we do different writings, and those memoirs and those audios are kept and used. So for us, the idea is to be the queer museum, to be one of the voices, to be the queer museum in Bogota or for the rest of the country. But yes, we would like to go to other experiences. Yes, we have made contacts. We have talked with the Transvestite Museum of Peru and with other colleagues, even in Argentina, to replicate this in other places, because I believe this is needed by Latin America. Last year, the National Front prepared a complete movement defending our rights, and our rights are being more and more limited as we advance in time. Well, thank you very much and good luck.
And the last project, number five, from the Museo Provençal Bellas Artes Franklin Ralston in Argentina, is Natalia Segurado.
Hi. I'm going to ask you to please come down to the bottom floor. Get off the stage, in other words. Get off the...
Sí. Acá está bien. Sí, perfecto. ¿Están todos listos?
So are you all ready? Good day. Yeah, come in. Where do you want me to take you? Based on your accent, I think you're not from here. You come from another place, right? Yeah, welcome to San Juan. Welcome to Argentina. Would you like me to suggest places for you to visit? Oh, great. Where would you like to go first? Have you heard about Museum Franklin Rosen? Oh, great. So I'll take you there directly. Is it a new museum? Well, yeah, the building was opened the building opened in 2011. The building they have, but actually the museum is as old as my grandparents. It was founded in 1939, and it has one of the best Argentinian art collections. Petorute, Jutero, Spilimbergo. It's quite impressive, the collection. You're gonna love it. Yes, currently, today, if when you get there, you're going to find an Argentinian art exhibit in the framework of the 200 years of Argentinian art. Yes, imagine that. 200 years of Argentinian art. You will see the vast number of artists that we have in Argentina. Yes, of course. You may be asking yourself why I am so informed about this museum. Well, because with some other taxi drivers, we created this museum network. Yes, we went to some meetings, some training sessions at the museum. We discovered everything they do there. I had never been to a museum, and I thought museums only had old things and that they were boring, but that was not the case. It was nothing like that. We had a very pleasant time. We had different experiences. I was so excited when I came out that during the weekend I went back with my son and my husband. We went back to the museum. Yes, of course, they have games for children, and they have a dance workshops, photography workshops, paint workshops. And my husband decided to take a painting workshop, and currently he's buying lots of materials for his paintings. Does the museum inform us how to? Yes, we have a WhatsApp group, and we send information through this WhatsApp group. The museum tells us what they are doing so we can pass the information to you, and so we go with our families as well to visit the museums. Oh, you also like to paint? Oh, wonderful. So you're quite fortunate, because today there is a meeting, a drawing meeting, and you will be able to watch our artists live. There you will be able to taste our famous wines from San Juan, and there's going to be some food as well. And yes, and if you want to, yes, you can draw as well. They will give you materials. We're about to arrive. Yes, we're almost there. We're almost there. Here. Yeah, here we are, yeah. Right here. Well, wait a minute, I need to park. There's a lot of traffic, apparently. Well, let me see if I can park here, if it is permitted for me to park here. If I can stop. Well, let me see if I can stop. Perfect. We parked. Here you go. You have a free pass for the museum. In the back of that free pass, you have my data if you have to call me again. No, actually, it's been a pleasure for me to give you this information, and please enjoy your visit.
Bueno, antes que...
Okay, before we continue, I wanted to let you know that in San Juan's capital, there are 1,500 taxi drivers, registered taxi drivers, and on a daily basis, they do like 30 different rides per day. So this is a possible 45,000 contacts with the community of San Juan and the visitors that come to San Juan. Thank you.
Will the museum give you objects?
¿Cómo?
Could the museum give you objects to carry
Sí,
with you?
sí. El museo.
Yes, the museum is going to identify the taxi cab so they can be somehow identified. They're also going to be personalized free passes for the taxi drivers. And these taxi drivers are going to have their own passes and a credential so they can enter the museum for free with their families. The question is, have you had any special trainings? How have you been contacted? Well, this project hasn't been launched yet. We have contacted different taxi driver associations and our DMV department, and they have mentioned the possibility of wanting to use us for to give information about these cultural spaces and inviting people to visit those places. So this project is based on that need. How many museums do you have in San Juan? In your place in San Juan, there's about 10 museums in total, but the biggest museum and the newest museum is a very imposing building, is our museum. But although it is a very big and imposing building, many people are not familiar, do not know of the existence of the museum, or do not want to go in. So frequently when we pick up visitors and they want to go to the museum, many taxi drivers do not know where it is. So yes, in that sense, how do you want to approach it? Because the fact that many taxi drivers do not even know where the museum is, what is the museum doing? Is that the first step? How are you going to do it? Yes, the idea is to present an invitation, a call for people to join this mobile taxi network. We're going to have 2 or 3 meetings. These are going to be short meetings because for taxi drivers, time is money. So the idea is to prepare short meetings, very concrete meetings as to what we do, and we would also like to learn a bit about what they do. And the idea is that with time we're going to incorporate the stories of the taxi drivers themselves into the museums, perhaps through videos, somehow have our mobile network in the museum. Muchas gracias. Thank you and good luck. Okay, we have a problem. We have actually 5 problems. Well, actually, the problem that we have is you, the audience. What they're yelling now is popular elections or people's elections. We have part of the community here that want to riot. Haven't you understand what a crowning really means? You do not know what this implies? Let's put down the royalty. Who thinks we do not need royalty anymore? Let's screw the royalty. Let's screw monarchy. But again, the jurors do not really understand. But as you know, we've been here for more than 2 days, so now we are a bit more sensible to your request, and we are going to be more inclusive. So this is going to include us as well, not only those who want to have elections. So this is the decision that we reached. We have selected 2 finalists. The jurors have selected 2 finalists, and we're going to use this exercise of applauding and yelling as loud as we can that we experienced yesterday. So you take a popular decision. It has been quite difficult to select the 2 nominees. You brought 5 amazing projects that can be replicated in our spaces in many different ways. It's simply using our imagination to bring them to our own realities. This information is quite valuable. Thank you for your contributions. The 5 of you have taught us 5 different ways of enriching our daily work. Thank you very much, and a big hand for all of you. But again, since we are very pleased with all the 5 projects, and again, this is really not a beauty contest, not a beauty pageant, nothing like that, so we will give an award to the 5 of you. And now the 2 semi-finalists or finalists, or the 2 runners-up, you're not going to vote yet.
Let me invite up the winners of the last coronation from 2 years ago in Buenos Aires, Nicholas, Marcela, and Daniela from Farrow White in the Museum of Toys in Argentina, to bring forward the crown. Let me also invite, on behalf of the jury, Mobile Network to step forward, and Moving the Queue to step forward.
Mobile Edward y Museo Q. So we have our 2 semi-finalists. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the colleagues that were not selected. This does not mean that your projects are not fantastic. This was a very difficult selection, and now we are going to continue with a popular vote, and then we will see what we give who what. First, we're going to vote again.
What we do? No, we're gonna vote and then we will decide who gets the crown. We are a jury, come on.
But it's lunchtime.
No, I don't like to leave my position. I am a jury. Ok, vamos a ver. ¿Quién vota por el proyecto?
Mobile Network. Okay.
Moviendo el Q, or moving your ass is what we're voting for. Moving the Q, or moving your ass is what it really means. So we have no choice but to listen to popular vote. That's right. So congratulations to Moviendo el Q. You guys get the crown. As a matter of fact, we would have liked to give you a symbolic museum, because it is actually the voice of all of you that is being expressed, and you're going to have to express this voice really loud. We hope you get a lot of support from your communities with regards to your project, and that having participated here gives you what you're looking for, and thank you all so much. They're yelling, "Long live the Queen."
Sí, bueno, ¿con qué plata?